Let's play, gamers! Welcome to Game Design Game. I'm Matt, and I make games. I make video games professionally, and my hobbies are making board games and role-playing games for fun. In this channel, I give you game design tips and ideas and show you some of the games that I've made in the past. In episode 10 of Game Design Game, Tomb Raider Legend. I'm starting a series in which I'm going to play through many of the Tomb Raider video games of the past and talk about some of the features. And I have a background as a gameplay engineer and technical designer, and I'm going to talk about how these features work and a little bit about some of the problems and tips and tricks for trying to solve these problems and how to evaluate them when you find yourself frustrated in games that you play about features that maybe don't work quite the way you would like them to. In this episode and others, I'm going to, in each episode, play through roughly one level or chapter of a game, and I'll pick along the way one of the features of that level to talk about. I don't know what today's feature is going to be. I haven't started playing yet. So without further ado, let's get into Tomb Raider Legend, Part 1. Game Design Game. So starting with this episode, I'm kicking off a new series, and that series is going to be playing through several old Tomb Raider games. Not from the very start. I'm going to start with Tomb Raider Legend. And in addition to being a sort of watch and play style video, I'm going to focus on gameplay elements, specifically the design and engineering of different aspects of gameplay. Each episode of Game Design Game is going to focus on one chapter of one of the Tomb Raider games and on one gameplay feature that I'm going to discuss in a little bit of depth. And the reason I'm starting with the Tomb Raider games is because they're the games that I know the most about, because I worked on these games. I started with Tomb Raider Legend. I worked on that game, worked out many of the player mechanics there, and took that and grew it for several other Tomb Raider games. So without further ado, let's get into Tomb Raider Legend, Part 1. All right, starting up a game of Tomb Raider Legend. I'm going to use the default difficulty. Default difficulty in a video game is the one that the game developers likely have spent the most time with and tuned most thoroughly. And then from there, they make easier and harder difficulty settings, but don't spend nearly as much time with them. So default is usually a pretty good play experience. Also, I'm not trying to challenge myself. I'm trying to find gameplay features to talk about. To Bolivia.
Just because no one's ever caught one doesn't mean they're not real.
That is very true, but perhaps they don't wish to be found. I've heard they're rather fierce.
Yeti only look fierce. They probably don't like being so cold all the time. I shouldn't like it either.
You never have to be cold, my Lara, if you don't want to be.
Look!
Henry, what's happened?
Lady Croft,
Mayday,
please stay
mayday.
seated.
This is Bravo Tango 229er. We lost our port side engine. Trying to get crossfeeds open.
Are we going to crash?
Starboard engine non-responsive.
Not unless it's absolutely necessary.
Stabilizer jam. Kicking rudder, losing altitude. We're going full nose down.
Close your eyes, darling.
I don't want to close my eyes.
got your climbing gear on purpose.
What would give you that idea? Really, Zip. It's like going up a set of stairs, only far less boring.
Yeah? Well, I want to throw up every time you look down. Hey, Alice is back. Grab a headset.
Back so soon? From Florence, wasn't it?
Decided on Genoa at the last minute. My dissertation will never see daylight at this rate, but never mind that. What are you doing in Bolivia?
Ascending. Alistair, meet Tuanak. She's a lovely pre-Incan civilization, currently in ruins.
Delighted.
I've been looking for certain artifacts. Well, for some time now. And an old friend working in La Paz has tipped me off about a rather promising rumor.
What sort of artifacts?
An ornate stone dais, among other things.
A big rock, and she won't say why.
Oh, well. Where would the suspense be otherwise?
So the headset and the companions, the voices in her head are an attempt to create a little more dialogue and interaction without solitary crazy lady talking to herself. Most people didn't like this. Kick small objects. So it's showing PC controls, but actually I'm using a gamepad for games developed on console, which Tomb Raider Legend was developed for. It was PlayStation 2 first. Gamepad usually delivers a somewhat better play experience. Among other things, it's very easy to go slow or fast, and get some nuance in your directionality. So in a later episode I can talk about jumping and all of the problems that go along with that. I think I'm going to not do that in this episode. Shiny bit that was in here. Oh, there's a second shiny bit. Okay. So, in traversal games like Tomb Raider and things like Assassin's Creed and Uncharted, you can use the camera to look around and try and predict where you need to go. Big flat spots like that rock and that cave up there, stuff behind the waterfall, and that higher shelf up there, those all look like places I might want to get to. And there might be primary gameplay or there might be rewards back there. Step one is to get some elevation. And Tomb Raider jumps roughly twice Lara's height are pretty
Do me
normal.
a favor and check your PDA.
Not necessarily
It
realistic,
still works,
but
if that's what you're
good
wondering.
gameplay.
Cool. They said it was waterproof.
Grab a movable object. So, this is a push-pull interact. And at the moment, oh, I can pull it back, but only so far. You can see it gets caught up on these other rocks here. And push it forward and clear a path. Very simple use of a push-pull mechanic. Clear a path. So up here, not a lot of places to go. He's already down there. So, suspiciously vertical looking vine is a vertical pole climb. You can go up, you can go down. And when it's against a wall like this, you can also do a jump like that. So I could go to that shelf over there. Is there anywhere higher that I need to go? Doesn't look like it. Okay. So this
The video is going to make me
on
sick
the
if you keep on swinging, Lara.
gamepad
Look
has a
away
very
from the
fun
screen.
little swing and climb mechanic. I'll try going higher because I think I saw another higher shelf up there. Let's see. Climb higher. Is that anything? No, this is just where the water comes from. Okay. Oh, there's something in there. Not sure which one. This one looks less like it's advertised. Personal light source. And secret prize. Oh, and this probably drops me down the other path. But there's the vine. This was the other way in. So this game, in addition to just ledging a normal slow pace, you can use a button to move a little faster. And now this is an opportunity to jump away from the ledge. Jump around boulders.
That was too close.
And a swing pole. I should jump if I want to grab it. And overhand to the other side. And that's that mechanic. It's silly, but it's fun.
Copy that. I'm here, but I don't see no climber. Yeah, well, I can't shoot on sight if I can't see nobody. Got worked up thinking I'd put someone down today. Now there's nothing. He owes me one. Hell yeah, I'll tell Rutland myself. You know it.
Important dialogue to establish that the bad guys are bad.
Any idea who he is or who he works for?
I haven't the foggiest.
The Tomb Raider Legend
It's
uses a
deliberately
very
remarkable.
simple ranged combat system
It's deliberate, which isn't
with
good.
lock-on targeting, and the idea of the lock-on combat, and this goes back to earlier Tomb Raider games, is that the challenge of combat is more about defense than the offense. So you lock onto your target and you shoot them, but if they get a chance to fight back, you have to dodge around and jump and do flips while they attack you. We'll see more of that later, I'm guessing. Later Tomb Raiders went to a more traditional challenge of combat as aiming, and changes how you approach the play. Okay. Log. Oh, a reward. I can get over to it. Stuff in the way. This little log tips over when I'm on one end. It doesn't stay there. Let's try this again. Okay, another pushable rock. Just looking to see if there's anything else I care about over here. Doesn't look like it. So you'll notice this rock is in a sort of sunken area. So when you're doing a push-pull mechanic, it's very important to make sure that the puzzle object goes where you need it to be. And in this case, the rock is extremely constrained because it needs to fall just so to justify holding this log in this other position. Now I can reach the swing pole and swing to this higher portion of the waterfall. Shiny bling. This is introducing the magnetic grapple. Magnetic grapple sticks to metal things and makes it much easier to limit the gameplay in this natural environment of plants and stone. But the grapple is only going to have to deal with metal things. So I throw it, then I pull on it, and open up a new path. So in this game, the grapple can pull things, and the grapple can be used to swing.
Swear to God.
So what? They jumped out and started swinging?
No, sort of danced around, screaming and yelling, whatever.
Yeah? Well, I would have kicked the hell out of them.
Yeah, whatever, man. Came flying at me screaming monkey talk like
Press
that.
movement keys towards an on-screen
First
enemy
thing
while
popped
lock-on
into my
mode.
head. Just
So if I
bam, flicked it right between the eyes.
And it started smoking it?
That's what it wanted. Monkeys get hooked
Switching
on it. Go
targets.
crazy when they see you smoking.
So
Funniest
here,
damn
2
thing.
enemies means I can only shoot one at a time. And the dodging is more important.
Who are these guys? The question is, why go to this much trouble to guard some ruins?
You can see while I'm in aiming mode, I can do these dodges and flips. Very acrobatic. So that sequence was teaching how to use the fast ledging mechanic to avoid obstacles. So there's a falling rock. This has the jump antic, so you can see Lara is signaling that she's able to jump in this direction. I think in Tomb Raider Underworld, the antics got a lot better at communicating what was a good jump and what wasn't. Okay, there's another vine I can swing from. Oh, and a shiny bit up there, so I'm going to get up to the shiny bit. So rotate until I'm kind of facing it, and then start pumping. Forward, back, forward. No problem. Where's my vine? It's still out there. Oh, there it is. So now the environment has changed. The ledge that I just went across before is now broken away. So that little icon there is what we called saving grab. And it just means if she only barely makes the jump, you have a chance to save her from falling by pressing a button with a short timing window. Just a little way to make jump grabs a little more exciting. So, icon shows off screen grapple targets. There we go. So it's showing me that there's a thing I can grapple there. So, jump, grapple, jump. It's got the little bling effect on it. So you can spot it even without the icon, but sometimes things are off screen depending on how you like to hold your camera. So yeah, those earlier overheard conversations of how eager the mercenaries are to just kill people, is to establish that they are bad guys and that Lara shouldn't feel too guilty about slaughtering them. So here we have a use of an interaction to that's sort of an attack and or hazard. So these jumble of rocks here, I come up and interact with it. Oops, that wasn't interesting. Oh, shoot, environmental hazards. And it crushes the guys. In this game, you can shoot while sliding. That's a pretty uncommon mechanic. Okay, health pack's on the floor, so I feel good about using one. Get as many as it'll let me carry. Okay, so this is a case where I'm not too happy with the camera. One of these episodes I'll talk about camera, but so I'm not touching the camera stick right now, so the camera is doing some of this on its own. So on the one hand, it's trying to show where I'm going, right? So if I run towards the camera, I can't see where I'm going. On the other hand, it's maybe trying to guide me towards these stairs. But where that gets to be a problem is when I'm trying to look around, it sometimes fights me and changes direction on its own, like it's doing now. So, little aggressive camera, trying to be helpful, but kind of being a little bit annoying in its over-helpfulness. Cameras are a very tricky aspect of game design. If you make a really great gameplay camera, people barely notice it. And if you get anything not quite right, people get really upset by it. It can really impact the feel of a game. It can impact the speed, the way things, how fast they feel. A camera that's lower to the ground feels faster than a camera that's high up above the ground. And it can affect what you notice in the game, among other things. I'll have an episode about cameras one of these days, but not today. All right. Okay, suspicious trap floor there. Let's try our rock picking mechanic. Crunch. Okay, so it's very long. Oh, but there's a grapple over there, so.
Glad you're on your toes.
It's a useful survival skill.
Okay. Let's check any suspicious nooks. Okay. It's showing me some chains that go up.
What's all this stuff for? Moving heavy materials deeper into the mountain, probably. Sometimes ancient builders
There's a
have to
ledge up
tunnel
there.
around hard rock deposits.
So, what this is trying to communicate is I want to climb these chains, but I can't quite do so because of this weight that gets in the way. Stops me from getting high enough. Then it says to jump directionally off a vertical pole, press movement keys in that direction and press space. So if I want to get to that one, the hard part is lining things up, but now the camera is sort of automatically lining itself up, which makes things a little easier. So vertical pulls like that out in the middle of space, they're not against a wall, can be very difficult to get the controls lined up in order to make jumps like that work. Some of it is getting the camera to good directions, like you saw there, it lined up the camera, so I just had to jump backwards. So I'll talk about vertical pulls and camera and controls in a future episode, but that's just a hint as to some of the challenge. And the reason it's a challenge is because the game is a 3D world, the player only has a 2D stick input or keyboard input, and that makes it very hard for them to judge directionality when they can't see the top or the bottom of a chain, like the one on the left here. You can't tell if it's like really close up against the rock or really far away. So you have no sense of how far into the screen it is, and that would make it very difficult to judge the direction to it. We'll get more into that later. Okay, more chains here. Water, but deep water. So I have to swim through there. Checking for swan dive. One more time. Don't know if this game had a swan dive or not. Maybe not. So I'm going down. So this is another issue of 3D controls. Any swimming volume or flying, the player has forward, back, left, right, up, and down. And that's 6 different directions they can go, or 3 different axes. And again, the stick input only controls 2 axes at a time, so you can do it in a couple of ways. You can use the camera to add more axes into swimming direction. So if I just swim down here, the camera gives me an up and a down, but she's not really swimming down or up when I move the camera like that. So this game uses the buttons. So the jump button, or the upward movement button, takes her up, and the crouch button, or the downward movement button, takes her down. And this one, she climbs out automatically. I don't have to do anything special. I'll talk more about 3D swimming in Tomb Raider Underworld. Oh, look at this. Squishy walls! So I look ahead, I can see there's an object at the far end, so that tells me they don't go forever. You can kind of see how far they are. As long as I'm careful about it, I can just stroll right through there. But this is a longer set. Might get in trouble over there. So this is an introduction to push-pull.
Is that a skull of a monkey or a person? Spooky.
You're talking about what's in the cage. Skull in a cage. So, this is a push crate, or pull crate. So Lara grabs onto it and can move it forward, backward, and can rotate it left and right. And yeah, I wanted to talk about push-pull for this episode, because I think Tomb Raider Legend had push-pull that felt really good and that most other games don't do. The reason most games don't do it is it's not really necessary. It does add a little bit of gameplay opportunities, much more control over the object than something that can only go forward and back, or sometimes you can slide them left and right without rotating them, but they feel very gamey when you do that. This one feels like how you would expect to drag around a cage like this. Plus, we got to put a swingy skull in the middle. Alright, so, this cage protects Lara from getting smushed. be, she could climb on top of it and leave a little gap there. So it doesn't look like I need the cage here to get up anywhere. But one other use of a cage like that would be if these stairs weren't here, I could climb on the cage to get up to a higher ledge. Not that this is very high to begin with. So if there were a hole up there, I might pull the cage in to try and get up to the hole.
Looks like you're going forward.
Yes, but how?
With patience and persistence.
So that little camera cutscene showed me the movement of these sort of gear-like objects and the little pins that hold them in place. So you can see they're not going to rotate. It showed a door at the far end closing, so that means we'll probably need to fiddle with those in order to open that door. And then it introduced a device. Let's see if I can find it. Which button is it? It's this button. Rad mode.
That's a
Scans
mechanism.
objects. Another mechanism.
That's a mechanism. That's something I could move.
So it shows me the cages and some of the moving parts that I might be able to work
That's a
with.
mechanism.
Most of it is mechanism here. So we got some pressure plates. Alright. So I got a puzzle room, I got some pressure plates, I got a couple cages. If I step on this pressure plate, it unlocks that gear over there. So if I grab a crate, pull the crate onto the pressure plate, now the gear stays open. But that's not enough, because there's 3 pressure plates I need to deal with. And this one opens the door, but only if both sides are unlocked. So here's a little high point. See more ledges around the room. There's a little thing down there. Alright, so I need to get cages up here. Here's one cage. If I pull it out. So notice there's a bit of a physics quality to this cage. Right when I first pushed it up there, it kind of tilted against the edge of this tilted platform here. And when I walk to the other end, it lifts the cage up. Even though it's tilted on its side, I can still drag it on here. Is to try and get the cage into a decent position there where it's not falling off. And then I hear a leopard. Oh, leopard tried to kill me. Sorry, leopard. He's hiding. Sorry, kitty. So this gets into the issue of animals in a game with guns. It's really not fair.
Unfortunate place to hunt.
That's because animals don't get ranged attacks, mostly. And so the player can usually find a place to stand that the animal can't attack them. And unless the animal is able to fly or jump to get to where the player is, the animal really has no chance. So, that's just one of several reasons why animals aren't the greatest choice of enemy in a game like this. Okay, so I've got my crate over there, and we noticed that when we stepped on this end, it lifted the crate off. So what happens if I jump onto this end? And the answer is physics. Look at that, the crate flew. So now, hold down both pressure plates. Also, I noticed these elevated spaces up here, so before I go further, I'm just going to look for treasures. Take a peek into each of these. And look at that. Always check the nooks. So now if I stand here, both sides are able to turn and the door opens.
When it was fully furnished, we're looking at the stripped down version of what's left 1,000 years later.
But it closes very quickly. So I have to hold this one down, and there's one more cage over there. So before I mess with the last cage, this feels like a good place to take a little break and discuss push-pull game design and implementation issues. So I'm going to switch over to a little drawing board. All right, here's a simple introduction to how push-pull gameplay can work. There's obviously many different ways to use push-pull, but at its core, it comes down to moving objects in a 3D world. In most action games, push-pull is a type of interact or object interaction. That is to say, there's some object in the world, and you're going to walk up to it and use it, and that's when the pushing and pulling begins. Most interacts, things like doors and chests, you just interact briefly, the object animates, and then you move on with the game. With a push-pull, it's a continuous interact. That's to say that you start an interact and you have to deliberately end it by letting go, or sometimes something in the game might trigger you to let go for other reasons. But the interaction continues essentially as long as you want it or need it to, which can add a layer of difficulty to an interact system that might not always be there. So if all you've ever had are doors and chests and simple interacts before, adding in a push-pull to your game could be a completely different type of mode that just feels like an interact, or you can build it into an interaction system that allows for more complicated things. In some of the later Tomb Raider games, you'll see like prying doors and other like continuous interactions that are not just hit a button and you're done. So push-pull is moving object in a 3D space, and on the left here, I've drawn a little image of just a simple cube. A push-pull could really be kind of any shape, any size. They tend to be roughly a size that a player in the action game could climb on top of or move through, because in their simplest form, they're either used to move something so that you can climb to a higher place, or to move something so that you can reveal a passageway. But there's no reason pushes and pulls can't be larger. In fact, in Tomb Raider Underworld, we'll see some very large pushing and pulling that happens in that game. But at its core, when you've got a 3D object, drawn here as a cube or a crate, there's actually 5 different ways that you could move this thing around. So these red arrows are sort of showing or hinting at the sort of forward, backwards, left, and right dragging. And that's sort of keeping the object in its initial orientation. There's no rotation going on. It's strictly moving it on these linear positions. And that's the most useful version of push-pull in the sense of it's very obvious in a puzzle what you can and can't do, and the movements are fairly obvious as well. But what I've also drawn on this cube are these 3 little curly arcs with arrows on them, and those indicate that there's 3 different ways, in theory, that this object could rotate. So you could swivel it around its upright axis. That's sort of what the blue arc is indicating. You could roll it left or right. That's sort of what this green arc is indicating. And you could roll it forward and back, and that's what this orange arc indicates. So with these 5 ways of potentially moving an object around, the controls become an interesting challenge. So if you're thinking of a console control, a game controller with the sticks, typically your push-pull really only uses one of the sticks. And that means that you really only get 2 directions that are going to make sense to a player at a time. So trying to do all 5 rotations in a game, it's not necessarily useful, but even if it's useful, it's also really difficult to give the player that kind of control in a way that feels intuitive to them. So most of the time games are going to simplify these possible movements, and that's why in most games that even have push-pull at all, the motion is simplified down to 1 or 2 directions. And that's really because of keeping the inputs intuitive, or as intuitive as possible. So on the right here, I'm showing an overhead view of what games typically implement. So the very simplest version of a push-pull, really it's just a push. And you go to one side of the object and you push it away from yourself, and that either in a puzzle, that's all you need to do to move it in the right place. And there's a variant on this, on several of them, I guess I can get into, which is if the object is like a mine car or train car somehow that you can push that's on a track. Let me get a drawing tool. Then the track doesn't have to be straight. And as you push it, even though you're only pushing it in one direction, the object can follow that track, and that can help it to rotate and move in nonlinear directions, even though the input is really simple. And you'll see some of this used in some of the later Tomb Raider games as well, where when we get to those games, we'll be pushing mine carts on tracks. So a slightly more advanced version of that, and this one is fairly common, is you can push forward and you can pull back with no side-to-side motion. That's also can follow tracks. And the only reason that games don't always include the backwards pulling is that it's sometimes hard to justify, especially with like very large objects. You can imagine in your head being able to push something, but if it doesn't have handles, if it's smooth, it's a little hard to explain why pulling it makes any sense. But really, I'd say this forward and backward is a very common version. The next one here is you can push forward, pull back, and you can slide something left and right. The sliding left and right, it's very handy for puzzles. It keeps the box aligned in nice ways that you don't really have to worry about it getting in a strange orientation. And the controls are fairly intuitive because it just maps to the character's ground movement, or the stick, which will go forward, back, left, and right. The version that we see in Tomb Raider Legend is what I've shown here, which is we have a forward and back, we push and a pull, but instead of dragging something left and right with no rotation, instead left and right on the sticks actually rotate the object. And when it's rotated, then that changes which direction you can push and pull things. And so what we'll see in the second half of this puzzle is that we have to get a crate around some obstacles and into position, and that ability to rotate it makes it a little more intuitive as to how to move it around, and it feels less artificial. Most games really don't need this level of complexity. In terms of actual gameplay and puzzle solving, it doesn't add a whole lot. But what it does add is a little bit of immersion. It's a little more realistic than dragging a giant object with no rotation. So it's an attempt to help with immersion and a feel of realism when dragging these gigantic objects around. Realism in video games is always a little bit fluid and subjective, and most games, if you're going to say they're fighting between realism and gameplay, gameplay should usually win out when there's unable to be when they're not compatible. Gameplay should win out. And the bottom image here is a case that will show up in some other Tomb Raider games. Definitely in the Lara Croft Guardian of Light, Lara Croft Temple of Osiris games, there are these rolling spheres. And I think we might have one in one of the other Tomb Raider games coming up. In any case, if you imagine that this circle represents a sphere, so spheres are naturally very rollable, but we have a version of a push-pull sphere where Lara uses her hands to swizzle the sphere around. And in this case, the blue lines, as with the crate, they rotate Lara around the sphere left or right to change orientation. And instead of just sliding the sphere forward or back the way we do with the crate, she rolls it. So you can roll it forward or back, and these dotted red lines sort of indicate that when you roll the sphere in this direction, it actually moves as well. There's a couple of other interesting issues that can come up. I'm just going to use pencil for these. So when you're using push crates in puzzles, there are some things you need to worry about. So one of them is floor smoothness. So let's just imagine that we've got a floor and it's got a bump on it, and that could be a fairly small bump. But then that gets into a problem where if you're pushing a crate around, that bump can really interfere with your ability to push the crate. Now, this could be very useful in game design as a way to stop the player from getting the crate somewhere you don't want it to be. But if it's not intentional, then it could be very frustrating. It can slow the player's progress. It's sometimes hard to see depending on where the camera is and the lighting. And so when you have these, push-pull objects in your level, you need to really pay attention to the floor. A smooth and clear floor is obviously the one that's going to be the least problematic, least confusing for players. And in theory, these sorts of bumps could be a game design tool to constrain the box. Though it may confuse players, if you do this on purpose, it's good to make sure the art is very easy to recognize and see, so the player isn't confused about why they can't keep pushing in that direction. And this is a side view, right? So the thin line is the floor. Now, if I think of the same image as a top view, you can use this same idea to keep a box inside a room so that the player can't push it out of the room. So if you have these side-to-side walls with a narrow opening between them, the crate can't go out the narrow opening, and that means the box stays in the room where you want it. So when you're using a push and pull in a game, you have to make sure that your push objects can't leave the area where they're needed, especially if they're needed to solve a puzzle. If they're just needed to get out of the way to clear an opening, it's not as dangerous. But if you're trying to get them into a specific space to let the player get up higher, you have to be careful about that. And in Tomb Raider, we have a lot of cliffs and drop-offs, and so a final issue to keep in mind if you're working on a push-pull mechanic is drop-offs and cliffs. So in this area, if we have a push crate and there's some cliff and the player can get to it there, assume at some point that they can push it off the cliff. And so if they need it at the top of the cliff, you've got some issues to worry about. Now, if the puzzle requires pushing it off the high place to the low place, that's great. And this works fine. And you just need to make sure that the code tells the player to let go when the crate is far enough past the cliff that it's just going to tip off and fall on its own. So that's something you can use on purpose. It's something that can get you in trouble if it's not on purpose. So similarly with these cliffs, you can use, if you need to stop pushing the object off the cliff, you can use some sort of lip or maybe an invisible wall that only knows about crates. But you need to do something to keep that crate up high, or you'll need a way to respawn the crate, which is sort of, for example, the game Portal. You can lose your boxes, but in places where that's possible, they also give you a way to make more boxes. Hope this is helpful. This gives you a couple of different ways to think about pushing and pulling objects. Objects don't have to be crates. Dumpsters are a fairly common pushable object in modern city-type games. But really, it can be just about anything, as long as you can sort of justify why the player can move it around. Things on wheels make a lot of sense to push around. Crates, they're a little bit of a stretch, because usually the crates are bigger than the character, and it's hard to imagine them being lightweight. So it has to do with how plausible you need your game to be. If your game is just a fun, simple, silly puzzle game, it doesn't really matter. You can have them be as big as you like. So that's a thing more that artists need to concern themselves with, is how to represent objects in a way that the character can plausibly push them and pull them. So I talked a little about pulling earlier. Sometimes artists would put handles on these pushable objects to justify the player's ability to pull them. These are all things you need to think about if you're working on a push-pull mechanic. Now with that information, I'm going to grab this last cage over here and show you some of the movement. So this Tomb Raider Legend way of pushing crates around, it is a little more complex than other games use, but it allows things like very smoothly and naturally pushing this cage all the way around a room in a way that really would feel very stilted with a cage that can only move on left, right, forward, back axis without rotating. Physics of it here also feels very nice, and this is one of the few cases of using push blocks for physics puzzles for something other than just holding down weight. And we can see that it's physics again. If I just slightly walk to this end, it throws off the weight, but it doesn't fling the cage into the air. So that's how you can tell that it's not scripted, or at least not just scripted. Also that little bit of sliding there. That's all just physics being physics. Now it's possible, and I'd say likely, that when jumping off this end there is some physics, but there might be a little bit of helper code in there to make sure that the object gets up there. On the other hand, as long as it gets a little bit of height and distance, it's just going to hit this wall or this cubby and player will be able to get at it eventually. So the other thing, when your crates are physics, they can tip over like this. You can see now it's on its side, but she can still push it around. Whenever you have physics objects in a game that the player can interact with, you do have to worry about what happens when those objects get into strange orientations. So this time, not only does the door open, but it stays open because all 3 pressure plates are weighed down. But I still can't jump there from here. So, next step is to figure out how to get up there. It's a little too high for normal jumping. So we see these chains again. Use these slightly elevated cubbies. So let's see, can I jump over there? Yes. Horizontal chain heading across the room. Drop down, walk off an edge, or press F near the edge. So I've just been walking off the edge, but if I hit the button, she'll also turn around and grab that. Jump. I will definitely talk about the jumping of Tomb Raider Legend in a future episode. There's a lot to talk about there. And here we go, through the door.
Oh, damn! Move! Move!
Alright, I missed the buttons. Alright, so the infamous QuickTime events, much maligned and hated. So what QuickTime events like the one I'm about to walk back into are trying to do is allow a very dramatic cinematic situation to play out using close to normal gameplay controls. And what makes that challenging is that human players don't always know which buttons to hit and don't have a lot of time to think about it if the scene is dramatic and fast-paced like this. So the QuickTime event is helping the player use the normal controls within more of a reflex time instead of a slow, deliberate time like I can do out here in this room. They got overused, they didn't all get done well, and they got generally just maligned and not liked. And so games have moved away from QuickTime events and found other ways to do similar things. But it's really just a way to do a dramatic cinematic, but with actual gameplay control.
Oh, damn! Move! Move!
Jump. Should have been the jump button there. I'd say not the forward button.
You in one piece?
So yeah, I think
And still breathing, yes.
the buttons used for that particular QuickTime event were not good choices, because it should have been the sort of duck, dodge B button for the first low dodge, and then it should have been the jump button for the jump over second part. And that would have felt better, because those are the regular actions that you would use, is to duck under something and jump over something. Alright, I'm heading out of the tomb and into a lit up area. There's a helicopter and some guys.
Lara, have you found anything for the fire? Lara, what are you... Oh, no, get back! Good Lord. What is it?
There's something in the light.
Stay here. What? Who are you? What? What about my daughter? You stay away from her. She meant no harm.
What's happening, Mother? Who's there?
Oh, God!
Mother? Mother!
I don't think that was the recommended usage. Yeti!
Hold your fire! Lara Croft! I've been hoping I'd get to meet you. At ease. We're just gonna talk.
I'm listening.
Maybe you found a piece of this. Is this what led you here?
Where did you find that?
It doesn't matter. What's important is what it does. Do you know?
What I know is my business.
So you don't then, and that means you don't have a piece. Amanda said you were sloppy. You should have paid more attention in Paraíso.
Amanda? Amanda's dead. What the hell do you know about Paraíso?
We're done talking.
Run!
There is more than one. Father, you were right.
What was that?
Keep yourselves caffeinated, lads. We've some work ahead of us.
Means we're still alive. Can't complain about that.
Who doesn't like a good hinge? Alright, I think that's the end of episode 1. Seems like a good place to stop the playthrough. So, hope you like this new type of game design game episode. I'll be doing a few more of these, at least finish up Tomb Raider Legend, and if I don't get complaints about this, I will do some more with the other Tomb Raider games. And now for the big announcement. The Game Design Game Contest Winner. So, Game Design Game is not just videos about game design, it is also a game, and a game that may change over time. As such, people can score points, and I've been preparing a contest, and episode 10 is when I announce the contest winner. The winner is the person who got the highest single episode score for all of the previous episodes, and as of the time of recording, that winner is Kit Astro with a score of 21 points. Congratulations, Kit Astro. You're going to win a copy of Storyboard role-playing game, and I will contact you privately to work out how to get that to you. For those of you who are new to the channel, you can find out more about how the game is played in previous episodes, especially episode 0, or on the Discord channel. You can find the link down below. Next time on Game Design Game. More Tomb Raider Legend, starting in Paraíso. I'm not sure what mechanic I'm going to talk about. I'm kind of making this up as I go. I'll probably organize a little bit better after I've done a few and get an idea for how I want to do these. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and until next time, gamers, keep playing.